Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. And transformation includes so many different things. It involves technology, it involves social, it involves people from around the world. And Beerud has done something in all of these areas. How did you become the Beerud Sheth that we all know today?
Born and brought up in Mumbai, went to undergraduate school at IIT Bombay, then came over to the US for graduate school at MIT. All of that was in computer science. I had a short stint on Wall Street. Meanwhile, the internet happened. Netscape went public. I was really this regret minimization framework. What do you want to tell your grandkids on your deathbed? What were you doing when the internet was happening? And I didn't want to say, oh, I was trading bonds or something. That's when I launched my first startup called Elance, which pioneered the gig economy and online freelancing. It's now called Upwork and is a public company. It's funny, I was preaching remote work in the late 90s, and it took like 2 decades and a pandemic for it to become conventional wisdom. So sometimes these things take a while, and timing is everything. You don't want to be too early, but better early than late. So no regrets. It worked out well. And then I founded my second company, Gupshup. By the way, Gupshup is the Hindi word for chit chat. I joke about how this is going to be the next famous word from the language that gave the world yoga, nirvana, and Kama Sutra. As the name implies, it does conversational engagement, helping businesses engage with consumers through chat interactions and messages. It's really just been a long entrepreneurial journey. I've been blessed or cursed by two very, very long cycles, but sometimes you can't force this. There's a time and place for the markets to align, the stars to line up, with a lot of grit, a lot of battle scars, a lot of humility, but a lot of hunger and determination, and of course, some academic skill sets. That's the combination that leads me to where I am today.
I still remember the early days of Elance. It's true. If it wasn't for the pandemic, it wouldn't have become a commonplace thing, whether it's work from home, work around the world. What does it look like when you look back at all these 20 years it took to become completely mainstream?
At least in my mind, it was blindingly obvious, even and should have been even to the most casual observer. But it wasn't. This is the ultimate entrepreneurial lesson, which is consumer habits don't change, even though something is slightly better or superior. People are not going to change their habits. Usually, it changes when, as they say, you want to sell a painkiller, not a vitamin. It has to be a step function improvement in what people are doing for them to change consumer habits. And there's lots of examples around it. The economics of it, the benefits of it, it was always very well known. So it's not that it didn't happen, it happened in pockets. It happened where certainly people in the global and emerging markets adapted to it very well because those freelancers wanted to plug into a global economy. Small businesses in the US adopted it very well because it was very hard for them to hire talent. So we certainly found certain pockets and niches of opportunity. But post COVID, there was no way to meet face to face. And therefore, by definition, it became a step function improvement. You had to work remotely or not work at all. That's a huge step up, a huge benefit through freelancing. That's the nature of consumer behaviors. I can see similar trends. For example, let's say people love to carry around plastic credit cards because everybody has them, everybody accepts them, at least in the US. But you go to India, for example, where it was all cash, and then they leapfrog to a digital payment ecosystem. You'd think, well, why isn't the US getting there? Yes, it's better, but why bother? You're used to it, everybody's conditioned to it. So it kind of continues. That's a very important point on how you change consumer behavior. You just need these really, really big step function improvements. Yeah.
It's true, we are all creatures of habit and it takes time to make changes. Speaking of which, you brought up the point of vitamins versus painkillers. When I look at the use cases that people put forward for Gen AI, a lot of them seem to be vitamins. Are you able to see some that are painkillers and must have applications that Gen AI can solve today?
Again, it depends on context. If you look at the US ecosystem, it's already heavily digitized. Websites are pretty good, accessible, easy to use because businesses have spent at least 2 decades optimizing it, making it pixel perfect. Not only that, most businesses have call centers, they have agents that are accessible, reachable. All of that generally works well and the business model support it. But if you go to the emerging markets, and this is something Gupshup has a lot of experience with, when you go to the emerging markets, for a variety of reasons. You don't have enough support agents and websites. People don't use it as much because these are mobile first and messaging centric ecosystems. So in these markets, if you can have LLM powered virtual agents for customer support, for marketing, for sales, it's a night and day difference. It's a huge step function improvement. While in the US, not so much. So we are seeing very, very rapid adoption in certain parts of the market for AI technology. Just the sheer scale of the number of consumers, which is in the billions, but most of these businesses, price points are lower, margins are lower, so they can't have giant customer support teams. That's just one example. There's plenty of other examples of where just internally within the organization being able to assimilate vast amounts of data to train people or answer queries. There are certainly opportunities. It's a little too early to pass verdict on LLMs. What is it, about a year and a quarter where people have been using it? Entrepreneurs are working on these areas should make sure that it is a huge improvement over what is. Otherwise, if it's just nice to have, your sales cycle will be longer, your priority of the buyer will be lower, the margins will be lower, the price points will be lower. You're better off going and saying, look, you couldn't do this at all, or it was extremely painful, and now you can actually solve a real problem. Focus on those niches first.
We are definitely in exciting times. Tell us about Gupshup.
The vision has stayed steady, even as some of the implementations have evolved. Like I mentioned earlier, Gupshup means conversation, and we've been focused on using these conversational channels or messaging channels as a way to deliver digital services to the other half of the world that's not web centric, that's in the mobile first ecosystems. That vision continues. If anything, it's just become more and more established. At a technology level, in the early days, SMS was the only way to deliver content to consumers, and SMS, while truly ubiquitous, is actually a very limited protocol. It's text only, and in some countries it's one way only. You can't even do two way. So it was used for basic notifications like your flight is delayed, your order is confirmed, your package is arriving, things like that. With newer and richer messaging channels, WhatsApp is one, Instagram, RCS is another channel. Now you can do two-way, you can do richer interactions. There's additional features and capabilities built in where messaging is now becoming a super app, almost WeChat. It went from being just a communication and a notification channel to being a foundation for building a giant internet, a conversational internet. If you think of the chatbots as the new website and you think of the messaging app as the new browser, then this is a parallel internet that is emerging, and it's growing very, very rapidly. So I'm very excited about this trend. It's going to digitize the other half of the world. It's bringing internet digital services into the remotest corners of the world. It works in any language. It works through voice or text. So even, let's say, the grandma in a remote village in India or Brazil can access it in a very natural and intuitive way. These conversational channels force computers to behave like humans rather than the other way around. And when that happens, your concepts like digital literacy and digital divide just fade away. Why do humans have to be literate about computers when you can have it the other way around? It's really expanding. We're very excited about the possibilities here.
It's about time we bridge the digital divide. And speaking of WeChat, I had a chance of using it when I was in Asia. WeChat and Gupshup, how are they different from each other?
Firstly, WeChat is an app. Gupshup is not. We work on other apps, messaging apps like WhatsApp, Instagram. WeChat was the messaging app inside which businesses could build mini programs, as they call them. These operate entirely within the messaging app. With the messaging app, you have identity that's baked in. It's highly viral. You have the wallet and payment methods also built in. Plus, you have access to the location, camera. It just offers a richer set of capabilities and becomes very, very convenient. And the messaging app is already being used 50 or 100 times a day. So it just made it that much easier to load it up with other kinds of services. But it's not exactly conversational in the true sense. It is wrapped inside the messaging app, but it's also very structured interfaces. It's not like a conversational thread. What's happening on WhatsApp and Instagram and RCS and so on, these are more conversational chatbot-like interactions like ChatGPT. What Gupshup does in particular, where we come in, is we are the tools that enterprises use to do business on this conversational internet. On the web, if a business wants to set up a website, they need to go get web tools or CRM tools or support tools to do business there. In this case, Gupshup provides the conversational internet. Gupshup provides the enterprise tools. to conduct all of these activities.
So now, after the success of Elance, you've been in the Bay Area for a long time. You could have picked up any problem that could solve something in the US. What motivated you to work on Gupshup, which, as you said, serves the rest of the world?
Sometimes the problems choose you and not the other way around. I spend a lot of time going in and out of different cultures and countries. And at this point, I travel all over the world. Latin America, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and India a lot as well. I find that sometimes there are these kind of opportunities that are blind spots in America, but are huge opportunities worldwide. Sometimes the naive assumption is that the whole world is going to use the same tech stack that America uses. But technology always exists in context. If you think about the web, it emerged in an era of laptop desktops and got super well established long before the smartphone came about. So it was just built in a different era and people got comfortable with it and we still use it. In the US, everybody has a home and an office, spacious enough where there's a place to work with a laptop and desktop. But what we take for granted in the US, it just doesn't exist in many of the emerging markets. Homes are much smaller, offices are smaller, people are on the road a lot more. So therefore, sometimes the only digital device that people have is just the mobile phone. That just forces you to think very, very differently about the ecosystem. I don't know if I can tell you if it was some grand plan or design. My approach has been you just have to be open to opportunities, what's happening now in this context, and how can you have the greatest impact. When I was looking at the landscape at that point in time, really the mobile revolution was happening. You had the next billion or maybe the next 4 billion people coming online. If you want to build something internet scale, well, you got to build the next internet, really. Just by observing and trying to maximize impact, I stumbled onto this. It actually played out in quite the same way and just continuing to scale much, much bigger.
I can see that Gupshup, just like Elance, is not just about technology. It's trying to understand people, markets, and really doing things that are most meaningful in that context. In what ways have these ventures changed who you are? Are you a different person than people knew you, say, 20, 30 years ago?
So easily in so many different ways. I don't even know where to begin. Firstly, just as an entrepreneur, we've had so many pivots and false starts and things that didn't work very well. And all of that just drives a lot of humility into you. I was blessed with an exceptional academic record, but the real world doesn't work that way. You could be smart, you could work hard, but if the consumers are not ready, the tech landscape is not ready for what you're bringing into the world, then just not going to get adopted quite as much. Sometimes you can't manufacture markets. It has to line up. The rest of the ecosystem has to fall in place. You just develop a lot of humility or maybe intellectual honesty. You don't drink your own Kool-Aid. You don't get carried away saying, oh, this should happen and therefore it will happen. Yes, you still need that ability of saying, okay, this is a great thing. It should happen, but you should constantly validate with the world saying, look, do you think it's useful? Would you use it? Is this a painkiller or not? Humility is one. Both Elance, Upwork, and Gupshup have been very, very global businesses. I have this unique perspective of and a really huge appreciation for the emerging markets. Even that term, at some point, emerging markets will disappear. There's a lot of leapfrog happening. There's a lot of innovation happening. There's a ton of energy and growth and opportunity, which is a bit of a blind spot in the American tech landscape that creates great opportunities for us. So just a greater appreciation for that. Building global teams and cultures helps you really appreciate how people everywhere in the world have the same aspirations. Everybody wants a better life. So I don't even know what all these wars are about. What are we fighting over? We have people in all these countries, including in warring countries, they're just normal people. It really just brings a ton of maturity and exposure and perspective and experience across all my entrepreneurial journeys.
I'm grateful that people like you have taken it upon yourself to work on these global problems. And they have local nuances. It's not like there's one problem, but the problems manifest in different ways and need different technologies. So when you were at MIT Media Labs, there were so many amazing technologies that were being invented. Yeah, I still remember the sixth sense and all that. A lot of it hasn't yet come to fruition. Do you see that happening in the near future?
There's a time and a place for any tech. See, technology ultimately is a means to an end. People don't wake up saying, oh, let me go get this new technology just for the fun of it. It has to solve a problem, and there has to be a purpose for it. Sometimes it's not even just you, a customer, individually looking at it, because some of this has to have a social context. Let's say if it's a communication technology, you can't be the only one. If your friends are not using it, well, who are you going to communicate with that tech? So then, as a society as a whole, we have to adopt it. Or there's a prerequisite, like all the metaverse ideas, for example. You need these cost effective and lightweight devices to be able to use it. And we're not there yet. They're all great ideas, but it's probably still going to take a few more years. The whole stack, the hardware layer, at the OS layer, and then at the application layer and the software layer, and then even the business model layer on top of it has to evolve and emerge and mature. All of those have to line up correctly for it to work. I don't think of it in terms of good or bad ideas. It really is just the right idea at the right time in the right way. So you really have to contextualize it. That's what makes entrepreneurship interesting. People sometimes get caught up with great idea or not. Throughout history, like YouTube 2 years ago would have been a bad idea. 2 years later would have been a bad idea. But at that point in time, it was a fantastic idea because it needed bandwidth to play video. And there's many other such concepts. The other thing I just wanted to highlight, so when you take technology and recontextualize it to different parts of the world and different cultures and countries, my greatest hope is ultimately when we digitize, what are you really doing? You're connecting people and you're driving content, commerce, and collaboration among people. Those are the factors that drive peace and prosperity and know-how and information. Though I'm beginning to question that somewhat, the fake news and the polarized debates sometimes people have, where the more information you have, people still find ways to stay uninformed. That scares me a little bit. But in general, the rest of the world is waking up to the trends that in the US we've gone through. And that's exciting, getting the whole world connected, where everybody now has exposure to a better life and a better world and better news and content and information. Hopefully, it brings newer ideas and prosperity rather than rehashing old wars and unfinished businesses.
It's true. On one hand, we are working towards democratizing and making technology available worldwide. So even small villages are connected with the metros. On the other hand, job losses or war times are creating lots of anxiety for the next generation. Do you have any suggestions or advice on how people, especially entering the workforce or in the midst of all these changes, how they can respond to the changes and how they can have meaningful careers or meaningful engagement with these technologies?
Yeah, these are certainly going to be very, very interesting times. And the rise of AI, so far it's just been LLMs, but now you have voice and video and so many other things emerging. We are on a trajectory where AI is going to get insanely productive. Robotics is going to get into the act as well. As all that happens, a lot of work will get automated, productivity will increase. And whenever that happens, and the society as a whole will get much more prosperous. If we can do more things with the resources we have, so much the better. So you think that GDP grows, maybe there's a tax windfall as well for governments and so on. But at an individual level, obviously, a lot of tasks are going to get automated. Sure, some people can try reskilling and retraining, but there may be some people who just might not be able to keep up with the capabilities of AI and robots. So as a society, it becomes an existential question. What do we do with these people? I would like to think that the equilibrium would be where we create an expanded version of social security where the basic needs and necessities are taken care of. It doesn't need to be a big political debate because the economy will have enough surplus resources and tax windfall to support that. Imagine if you have AI so productive, it can provide basic housing and transportation and food and shelter and healthcare and education to the whole population, then so much the better. The political challenge will be, can you drive the redistribution? Do we get into these capitalist versus socialist battles, and how much is too much, how much is not enough? It gets even worse across countries where there might be even vast differences. We run the risk of creating enormous inequality. Hopefully, we can, just as a society, as a political ecosystem, we can figure out how to at least take care of the bottom, so that there is a safety net. On the high end, the sky is the limit. People who want to work and can work are going to create amazing things. There's going to be many, many more opportunities. So yeah, it's a risky, potentially treacherous time coming ahead, where we have to be very careful. There'll be a lot of disruption and adjustment. But I'm more among the optimists in that I would like to believe that as humans, we can collaborate enough and solve these problems, create a better life than ending into wars and fights over resources. And that's my hope, not my forecast.
Hopefully, we won't have to survive AI, but make AI a partner in our life and create that abundance that it's promising and use it in a productive way. Well, this is the reason I talk to people. Beerud, we could be talking all day long, but it's amazing and exciting to see the work you're doing and the resilience with which you're doing it. You don't seem to ever give up on something that you've taken, and you go with the flow and make things happen. So, all power to you. And to people listening out there, I want to hear your stories. What are the challenges you have faced? What are the challenges you see in remote parts of the world? Which ones appeal to you? Which ones do you feel like solving? Please come forward. I want to hear your stories. We live in very interesting times. As the Chinese say, it's almost a curse to live in interesting times. Let's make the most of it. Thanks again, Virud. It's exciting to see what you're doing.
Thanks, Shankar. Thanks for having me here.